Next dancer is Anthony Rose, two-step. It is the most popular of all the country dances and probably why you clicked on this video, because you want to know how to do it better, right? So now if you've never danced two-step or if you've danced two-step before, we're going to give you a simple and easy system that you can follow to make it so much easier, more comfortable beyond this point. So stick around. All right, guys, here's how this is going to work. I'm going to lead Rose through some stuff. You guys are going to watch it, and we're going to do a bunch of hand changes, a bunch of stuff, and then we're going to teach you how to do all of that stuff in just a simple conversation. People think it's way more complicated than it is, but we're just doing lead and follow. She literally has no idea what I'm going to do now, but then you're going to get the idea of why that works. Here we go. So we're going to teach you guys all of this in one quick video. All right, so a lot of you guys probably watched that and said, how could we learn all of that stuff in one video? Because the thing is, we're just doing three things, the three basic steps, and we're just changing hands as we do it. Now, there are actually 4 things you can do in this video, but 90% of everything you're gonna do is one of these 3 things, okay? So you've got rhythmical walking, turning her to the right, and turning her to the left. Once you know how to do those things, and once you get the basic idea of those things, then it's just hold her hands differently as you do it, okay? So what we wanna do in this video is revisit those 3 basic things and make sure you guys are doing those things well, because everything else will be a lot easier after that. Okay, so the first thing that you can do is what we call rhythmical walking, and as you can probably guess, that's just walking rhythmically, or quick, quick, slow, slow in a straight line, and we'll dance quick, quick, slow, slow. Okay, so she has walked backwards, I have walked forward. The second thing that you can do is turn her 1.5 times, that's important, to where she's facing backwards and she finishes facing forward. That's 1.5 turns. And then the third thing you can do is turn her 1.5 turns to the left to where she ends up facing backwards. So if you watch that again from this side, she has rhythmical walking, quick, quick, slow, slow, 1.5 turns to the right and she's facing forward, and then 1.5 turns to the left and finishes facing backwards. Now, if you were to rewind this video clip, and that stuff that we just did lead and follow on, that's really all it is. I was either walking her in a straight line, turning her 1.5 turns to the right, which means she faced it backwards, she turned to the right and she finished facing forward, or I turned to the left where she was facing forward, she turned 1.5 to the left and then she faced backwards, okay? It's a lot of words that
Take a breath.
Just came out of my mouth, and now I need to breathe. Yeah, so,
Clear.
But everything that we did is we just did that stuff differently, okay? So the first thing we did is we did a rhythmical walking, if I can remember. We did rhythmical walking, and then we turned her to the right and she ended up facing forward. Now she's turning to the left 1.5 times and she's facing backwards. Turn to the right 1.5 times and she's facing forward. Turn to the left 1.5 turns and face backwards. It's now to the right and face forward. Turn to the left and face back. Turn to the right, face forward. Turn to the left, face back. Turn to the right, face forward, and it's just that stuff over and over. So the thing is we got to go back to and revisit the basics, because that's the stuff. That's where it's at. Yep. So work on how you turn, how you connect, how you lead, and here's the other thing we want to talk about, are what we call the 3 assumptions of two-step. Okay, so in two-step and in all dances, there's a certain number of things that we assume is going to happen. Now, there's 3 in two-step. The first one is, if that's our line of dance, like she's going that way, like everything she does continues to go that way. The reason why we call that an assumption is not a rule. She doesn't always do that, but she assumes she's going to do that, and that's what she does by default, unless he's telling her to do something else, right? So she assumes that. So like if we were dancing in this position and we were here, she assumes we're going that way. Once I initiate her motion, she continues to move that way. I don't have to like keep, pushing her and shoving her in that direction. She assumes that's going to happen, so she just continues that until I tell her to do something else. Now that second assumption is again an assumption and not a rule. That is, she assumes the rhythm's going to be quick, quick, slow, slow. Now I'm not leading that. So once I start her motion, I'm not leading quick, quick, slow, slow. She's just going to do that by default. And the reason why that's an assumption and not a rule is because sometimes I want her to do a different rhythm. But if I want her to do something other than quick, quick, slow, slow, I have to physically lead it or manipulate it or change it. The third thing is the degree of turn. She assumes naturally that she's going to do 1.5 turns. So if she's facing forward and I ask her to turn, she assumes that's going to be 1.5. Now, does she always turn 1.5? No, she doesn't. Sometimes she might turn 48.5 or 53 or maybe just 1 or whatever it is. But if I want her to do something other than 1.5 turns, I have to manipulate and physically lead. So if I let her from here, and then I center go, she's going to do 1.5. But what if I wanted her to do less? There's something I wanted her to start facing forward, and instead of doing 1.5 face backwards, I wanted her to finish facing forward again. Like I could actually just cut her off in the middle of that turn and say, oh, that's enough. That's enough times. Or maybe I want her to turn a whole bunch of times. I just have to keep leading that until I do that. But why is it 1.5? Because some people will disagree and they'll actually teach a basic step or a basic turn to where she starts facing backwards. And then she does a turn and she ends up facing backwards again. That's complete. Don't do that, okay? So someone tells you to do that, you can't do that. That just can't be the basic idea. So here's an example. If we were in sweetheart position and we were coming towards you, what does she do in the absence of lead? That's an assumption. She has to know, if I ask her to go, how much should she go, right? Before he changes it. So if we're in the sweetheart position and I turn her, but I leg over, I can't lead her. Where does she finish facing? She should finish facing backwards. That should be 1.5 turns. So if we do that again, what she's going to default to, or the assumed degree of turn, is if she's facing forward, she should assume she's finishing facing backwards. So here's another example of that. If we do these side-by-side free spins, she's facing backwards, and if I let go of her, how much should she turn? 1.5. But if I turned her here, how much should she turn? 1.5. That is her built-in degree of assumption. So if you're assuming you're only turning one time, you're setting yourself up for failure later. So your degree or assumed degree of turn is 1.5. So if you watch all this stuff that we did, let me see if I can remember how we did it again, but this is just rhythmical walking, walking in a straight line. What should she do? 1.5 turns to the right and finishes facing forward. Now she does 1.5 turns to the left and faces backwards. 1.5 turn, I don't remember what we did, but now she's facing forward. Now she's facing backwards. So it's just this stuff over and over, right? So that is your default basic for 90% of everything you're gonna do. Now, notice that we called these things assumptions and not rules. I mentioned that earlier. You don't always turn 1.5. You don't always do quick, quick, slow, slow, and you don't always go forward. But again, if he wants her to do something other than those assumptions, he has to communicate, right? So we can literally take any pattern and manipulate those assumptions, right? So if I wanted her to come forward and stop at one turn, I would just simply clamp down on it and say here. But what if I wanted her to turn a whole bunch of times and still face forward? I could do that again. But in the absence of me asking her a specific degree of turn or rhythm or whatever, I can even send her from forward to backwards. So like I could be sending her here and say, now I want you to go backwards temporarily until we go back to the basic flow of traffic again. Like I have to physically communicate and lead that. So your 3 basic things are rhythmical walking, turning her 1.5 to the left and turning her 1.5 to the right. If you get those things, everything else is easier, because then, you just have to change hands and touch her differently while you do that stuff, okay? So don't make it so much more complicated than it actually is, because it is really, really simple if you approach it in that right. Now, we have a new system, we mentioned this earlier at X-Dance University, that is based around this system, which we call the horizontal approach. Now, how many of you guys comment down below if this has been something that's happened to you. You've gone to a dance teacher, or you've got some video series online, or somebody taught you some stuff, and there was a step number 1, step number 2, step number 3, and it's kind of like you're learning these things, and you think this we call the vertical approach. You think the more stuff you learn, the higher you go, the better of a dancer you are, and that's just not true. Instead of learning vertically, you should learn horizontally. There's rhythmical walking, turning her to the left and turning to the right, and then there's some things where we break those assumptions, right? Because once you've learned these 3 things, no matter what else we teach you, it's just one of those things done in a different way. Later on we get into weaves, which is the 4th category. But if you're doing this, by the time you get from rhythmical walking, turning it to the right, turn left, you learn something else to stack on top. You're just learning one of those things again, just repackaged and sold to you a different way, right? So what we're doing is stacking this way. Now, X-Dance University, again, there's a link down below if you want to check out what that's all about. But again, if you guys have any questions, if there's something you need help with, how do you feel about doing dancing this way? Comment down below. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next week.
Subscribe! That's literally why we're doing this video.
She's so mean to me.
I'm so sorry.